What you gonna do when we come for you? Well, first we gotta find them. And how do we find them? Well, before I talk about all that, my name is Jared Gant. Here's my student ID, the best student ever. And I will be discussing the neurological contributors to a person who commits crimes. I will be pulling information from the Profiling Violent Crimes and also the American Homicide textbooks that we received from Seminole State Bookstore. So, crime is associated with the brain network involved in morality, value-based decision-making, and theory of mind, says a neural mapping study, Tim Wallace. He also reported that a man under the name of Ed Gein was reportedly beaten around the head by his alcoholic father. He also reports that a man named Gary Heinick fell from a tree at age 6 and hit his head hard enough to deform his skull for life. He then reports that Jerry Brutus he was electrocuted as a 21-year-old, but he complained early in his life about recurring migraines, headaches, and also blackouts. Edmund Kemper suffered a head injury after crashing his motorcycle. Ouch. All these things affect one thing, and that is a mental state of mind. Your brain is a very sophisticated thing, and it's also a very sensitive thing. And when injuries at age 6 happen that deform your skull, some decisions that you would have made before falling out of a tree, before falling off your motorcycle, before being beaten by your alcoholic father, all change. But some of these guys had injuries before committing murders. So does that make them a murderer in a sense of a guy who has a mental illness because he is lacking part of a percentage in his brain he cannot use to function to make right moral, mental, and value-based decisions? Because as Tim Wallace said, the criminal is associated with the brain network. That being said, lacking of affirmative defense is examples like insanity, or self-defense, but we're going to stick with insanity for now because we're talking about a mental case. So we're going to ask the questions of, so who is actually mentally ill? Who can be rehabilitated, and how can we prevent this from continuing? Well, to answer these questions, we're going to dive into some murder traits from the Profiling Violent Crimes, which the first one is a serial killer that is obsessed with power and control. So say these serial killers are the ones that are dominant when it comes to the way they kill. And this may have been an Ed Gein who was beaten around the head by his alcoholic father at a young age. And now he is mentally getting back at everyone else for something that his father did when he was a child, but it hurt him so much through the beatings that he now beats and kills other people and does these crimes hastily. Then you have the visionary. The visionary is the guy almost like the power and control, except a little smarter. He's more psychotic than the power and control serial killer because, in fact, he may have had mental abuse along with the physical abuse or even sexual abuse. Either way, he has something that he sees and he wants to voice it to the public and make a statement. And this usually comes when somebody wants change, but it's not the public's right point of view. The missionary is the guy who kills a certain class of people. So, for example, let's say that Joe over here dated a black girl and her people came and beat him up for him sexually assaulting her. He would then have a mental case, hey, all black people, it's possible, from being beat that hard, not thinking straight, and not saying a year go by, maybe it's just a few hours, and he goes and commits a murder on a black man or just her brothers who were black. maybe that blow to the head had him not thinking right at that moment. Maybe it's years later, and that blow to the head, that fall to the concrete, still doesn't have him sitting right. Then you have the mission. I'm sorry, we went over that one already. Then we have the hedonistic, the type of serial killer who makes strong connections between personal violence and sexual gratification. He is a lust or a thrill killer. Doesn't sound too thrilling to me, but he receives pleasure from the act of erotic experiences. That sounds insane. And that is exactly what it is. It's a lacking affirmative defense, if you ask me. Because what happened in his past to his brain that allowed, what was he, a rugby player? Did he collide with a few guys' heads? You know? These pains to the head contribute to a long flow of failure to process what exactly you should do in certain situations. And once a mental decision has been made, the human mind has this illness about it that won't turn sometimes. It's like once you're down the path, you don't want to revert yourself and go back where you came from. And sometimes it's already too late. If you murder somebody, it's too late now. But instead of him walking away from that path, he mentally just sticks with it, and he becomes a serial murderer who is a thrill killer. Going back to these questions. So who is mentally ill? Who can be rehabilitated? And how can we prevent this from happening? All those questions have no simple answer. But the simplest way I could put it is that we should look more into concussions and the history, medical history of banging of the heads, football players such as Aaron Hernandez, who was a tight end who received head injuries all through high school, you know.